As we move on into these later emperors in the 4th century, we see again this breakdown of the government. Right? You have these overlapping rulers, some of the east, some of the west, shared rule taking place. So there's a lot of instability after Julian and a lot of lack of clarity as to what is going to be the way to organize this government. Some try to practice non-interference to keep everybody happy. Others, however, fall back into this split between Arianism and Orthodoxy, or the Nicene position. Again, we'll explain more about that. And so you have Arian emperors who support Arian bishops, Nicene emperors who support Nicene bishops, and then, of course, exiling or persecuting the opposite. Right? So if you're an Arian emperor, you kick the Nicene bishops out. If you're a Nicene emperor, you kick the Arian bishops out. There's threats, promises, exile, torture. All of this takes place in this kind of struggle within Christianity. Yeah, almost. Not to the extent of the Inquisition, because the Inquisition often was rooting out things that are, in this case, kind of obvious. Right? So you know this person is an Arian bishop, or you know this person is a Nicene bishop. But when we get to the Inquisition, that'll be, you'll hear these rumors, and so you have to investigate them. But it's very similar in the sense that you're trying to use the weight of the church office, the imperial office, and trying to convince people to change their ways, like a Cold War. Yeah, not even a Cold War though, because you're even kind of, you're not killing as many people, but you're kicking them out and sending them away. Yeah. But on the other hand, there is this. So on the one hand, the emperors are kind of imposing their will, their theology, on the church. On the other hand, though, a lot of these later emperors feel that they need the support of the bishops and other church officials to legitimate their rule. Right? And so if the bishops will support them, then the rest of the Christians will as well. And so you have religious advisors to the emperor. Bishops will act as emissaries or ambassadors to invading forces. So they kind of serve political and administrative functions as well. And not only will the emperor try to impose his theology on the bishops are going to try and get the emperor to side with them. Right? And so Nicene bishops trying to block the activity of Arian bishops or Arian emperors as well. On the other hand, things start deteriorating as well for paganism and its official support. So blocking the activities by bishops and imperial officials. I don't know if that was on there. Things, as I mentioned, start to deteriorate for paganism. The Emperor Gratian, for example, will order the end of financial support of paganism and its priests. And so while there had been a lot of Christian emperors in between all of this, there's still been some support of pagans. That is done away with. But it doesn't appear that Gratian himself is really anti-pagan until he begins to rule with a man named Theodosius. Now again, remember, this has kind of gone back and forth. Sometimes there's these shared rulers, and sometimes there's one ruler. Well, Theodosius had started by ruling the eastern part of the Roman Empire at the beginning. But eventually he will become the sole ruler of Rome as emperor, or as the sole Roman emperor. He will be the last to do so. When he dies, he will split it between his sons. But of course, what we're seeing here with all of these are the challenges that these individuals are facing, these emperors are facing, in trying to be an emperor as well as being a Christians. So Theodosius will issue an order in 380, 381, ordering all the peoples under his rule to follow the form of religion handed down by the Apostle Peter to the Romans. And so now we have this kind of imperial order that Christianity is the official religion of the Roman Empire. There are some policies that he has for a while that protect pagan worship, but even then he will later forbid paganism as well. He is a Nicene emperor, right? He supports the Orthodox position about Jesus' divinity, and will even attempt to call a church council, the Council of Constantinople, as a way to kind of finish the Arian-Nicene split. It doesn't work. Sometimes he will sentence heretics to death. And so, there's this challenge, right? Is this something you should do as emperor, right? And so if somebody doesn't believe what you believe, even if you label it a heresy, do you have the right, do you have the authority spiritually? Yes, you have it politically, but do you have it spiritually to order the death of the emperor? Additionally, of course, there are those who are religious leaders who are, again, yes, there's some guidance, but there's also some challenges that they are making against you and making against some of your decisions. So, for example, during Theodosius' rule, a Jewish synagogue is burned down by Christians. Theodosius decides that he's going to punish them and order them to rebuild the synagogue. Ambrose of Milan, who's bishop of Milan, is upset by this, feeling that Christians shouldn't be forced to support other religions. Right? So it's Christians who burned down the synagogue, but it doesn't seem like Ambrose necessarily says it's a good thing they did this, but he does not approve of Theodosius forcing those Christians to rebuild a house of worship for a religion that is not Christianity. And so Theodosius will eventually kind of retract that. Another time that Ambrose and Theodosius come into conflict has to do with a riot that takes place in Thessalonica. During the riot, an imperial official is killed. Theodosius at first forgives the killers, but then he actually tricks the people and ends up slaughtering 7,000 people that were connected with this riot. Ambrose, in response, bars him from the church. Right? So he can't have access to the church or to worship until he publicly repents. So who has power in all this? And does the bishop have the right to do this? In this case, it does chastise Theodosius, and eventually Theodosius will develop a law where sentences of death were delayed for 30 days. And so there would be time to consider, right, is this the right thing to do? And there would be time for bishops to weigh in and those kind of things. Theodosius will go so far as to outlaw pagan sacrifices, close temples, forbid any type of pagan worship, public or private. Right? So it's not just about public worship. It's the end of private worship as well, or at least the attempted end of private worship. And he will go on to name Christianity the state religion. He will go on, on his deathbed, he will actually call for Ambrose to come to him, because the willingness that Ambrose had to oppose him when Ambrose thought it was necessary. So there's still some commonality, even though there's this struggle. And so from this point on, we'll see a struggle that will exist throughout the Middle Ages between rulers and bishops over who has true authority. Right? Does the emperor, right, or do the various kings that arise, do they have the ultimate authority? I'm talking about Christian emperors and kings. Or does the bishop, or eventually the pope, do they have the ultimate authority? Who bends down to whom? Right? Is the emperor over even the pope, or is the pope over even the emperor? And because the emperor is a Christian, and so in this situation where the pope is the leader of all the world's Christians, conceptually, should the emperor give way to the pope? And then, of course, also throughout this 4th century, and thinking about the political aspect of this, there's the rise of a political theology, a theology that supports church and state being married together. But we'll pick that up when we talk about doctrine. In fact, why don't we'll quit a little bit early today, because we've kind of finished the politics, and so instead of going into culture and society, we'll stop here a little bit earlier. And I mentioned that on Thursday, we'll take the time to talk through some things related to the exams. The exam grades are available on Blackboard, but we'll talk through the exams, thinking about that second exam and some places where you might improve and some other things to be mindful of. So we'll pick that up on